On today's show, our first head coaching casualty of the season as LSU and Coach Ed Orgeron agreed to a separation agreement. However, he will finish out the season as head coach. Also, full reaction to SEC Week 7. We'll give you our winners and losers of the week. Georgia's defense rolls Kentucky. Bama dominates State. Vol fans throwing golf balls at Lane Kiffin. Locked on SEC starts now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy, and thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. Well, before we get into our winners and losers of the weekend, we do have some big news that broke yesterday in the SEC. Big news out of Baton Rouge. As Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated reported that LSU and head coach Ed Orgeron have reached a separation agreement. Coach O will not return to LSU in 2022, but he is expected to finish off this season as head coach. Reports that negotiations began just last week prior to LSU's win over Florida. And as Dellinger said, it is an unprecedented move in college football with a coach and school divorcing just 21 months after winning a national championship. There have been coaches who've made it 2 years after a title. Coach O didn't even make it a full 2 seasons. Unbelievable. Orgeron is now 49-17 at LSU, a tremendous record, but he's just 9-8 since winning that championship. As SI reports, issues went beyond the on-field results. They say a strained relationship between Orgeron and the administration was rooted in team management and public and private behavior, and that warped it into an untenable situation, distrust, and outbursts. If you remember, there were those viral pictures of Coach O with different ladies around town and that sort of thing, and I know administration at LSU was not a fan of that. They wanted their head coach to be, someone of integrity, I guess you would say. Not that Coach O was not that, but just the images and things like that came out, the school was not very happy with. You also consider, with Coach O, the big selling point on him when he got the job after serving as the interim following Les Miles' firing was that O would recruit at a high level and be a CEO, and that he would hire some good coordinators. He inherited a really good defensive coordinator, Dave Aranda, and his first hire was offensive coordinator Matt Canada. That didn't work out. So he moved on from him. He went to his buddy Steve Ensminger, who moved up from tight ends coach. And in 2019, he brought in Joe Brady from the New Orleans Saints to help out as passing game coordinator. And the mix of Brady with Ensminger really worked. And then you had Aranda on defense, and it ends up bringing LSU an undefeated season, an SEC title, and a national championship led by those guys, as well as a transfer quarterback in Joe Burrow. But what happens in 2020? Dave Aranda leaves for Baylor. O hires his old buddy Bo Pelini to replace him. That turned out to be a failure. And then this offseason, Steve Ensminger retires. O brings in Jake Peets, a rookie OC who was buddies with Joe Brady. And after firing Pelini, he brings in Durante Jones, another rookie DC. So, you got two basically first-time OC and DC, and both those guys have gone through their growing pains this year, and ultimately it proved the CEO head coach model only works when the head coach is great at hiring great assistants. Got to recruit well, and O has done that, but you also got to develop the talent. And it feels like there have been a lot of guys the last couple of years that Orgeron has not been able to develop, that they've missed on. 4- and 5-star talent that can't even get on the field, or when they do, they're not very productive. For LSU, it has been a mixed bag under Ed Orgeron. Again, nobody's going to take away the 2019 season from him. He'll always have that. Arguably the greatest college football season ever. So, again, I think Ed Orgeron is going to have a lot of interest out on the open market. His buyout is about $17 million. There are some reports saying that he's going to get most of that in the settlement. So Orgeron's going to just be fine, but where does LSU go now? Who will LSU look to replace Orgeron? Sports Illustrated says everyone is fair game. No coach is too big for their courtship. And athletic director Scott Woodward. They said basically Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, the only two that won't be on the available list. But some hot early names that have come up in conversation. Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. Mario Cristobal at Oregon. Lane Kiffin's name is popping up at Ole Miss. It's an interesting one. Of course, Lane got no problem jumping around from school to school. He already coached at Tennessee. He's at Ole Miss. Why not complete the trifecta and come to LSU? Some more long shot names being thrown out. Penn State's James Franklin. Michigan State's Mel Tucker. And a real long shot, Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. And if you really want to go crazy with some even longer shots, here's some other names to throw in. Hugh Freeze, Urban Meyer, Mike Gundy, and some coaches not currently head coaches out there that could be available. Chris Peterson, of course, coached at Washington when Scott Woodward was there. Bob Stoops doing the TV thing. Does he have any interest in getting back into coaching? Doug Peterson, former Eagles head coach. He has ties to Louisiana. And Tom Herman, who was the hot name rumored to be available to take the LSU job back before Coach Ed Orgeron got it. Jimbo Fisher, another name that's floated out there that had mutual interest with LSU over the years. I just think after beating Alabama 2 weeks ago, I think Jimbo is happy where he's at Texas A&M. And I don't think he's going to leave. But it'll certainly be one a storyline worth watching over the next couple weeks. As far as the SEC goes, it's the first domino to fall, first head coach out. Who else will follow? Will there be another SEC head coach out there this season that loses his job? We will see. All right. Thanks again to you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll give you the winners of the week here following week 7 of the SEC. Need to remind you guys about our friends at PrizePicks. Have you heard about PrizePicks? It is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and I know you guys will too. Go check them out. PrizePicks, a leader in college sports daily fantasy. They offer more college football props than anyone in the world. They offer all the star players from the Power 5, any prop you could think of, from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. All of our users that deposit and use our promo code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you're going up to 10 times on any entry. PrizePicks, it's got an award-winning app you can find in the App Store and on Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It's safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Go check them out right now. PrizePicks.com. Use our promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Rolling along here, Locked On SEC, and we've got plenty to recap. There's a lot that went down this weekend across the SEC in week 7, so let's jump into it. Let's do our winners of the weekend.
Winner. And now, your winners of the weekend.
Real winners win.
You know you can get a winner, 'cause I'm a winner, yeah, I'm a winner.
And we start with who else? The Georgia defense. My goodness, they are just permanently in this category every single week. Georgia defense continues to be the best in the conference this week, hosting number 11 Kentucky, holding them to just 13 total points. And for the most part, they kept Chris Rodriguez and the Wildcat offense in check. Kentucky, 27 carries, just 51 rushing yards. Keep in mind, Chris Rodriguez was not only the leader rusher in the SEC, but they were one of the leading rush teams in the country, and they got stifled. Will Levis, he threw 2 touchdowns, 192 yards, but he needed 42 pass attempts to get there. This Georgia defense, they held Kentucky to 9 of 19 on third downs, but just 243 total yards on the day. Also had 3 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss on the day. They just seem to get better every week. They are suffocating with Dean, Ringo, Walker, Kendrick. This group is so good, and they could be a historically good defense when it's all said and done. Shout out to the Georgia defense. Next up in our winners of the weekend, how about Alabama as a team? After their loss at College Station a week ago, Bama, they bounced back in a big way, handling up on Mississippi State and Starkville, routing them 49-9. Bryce Young, who had some issues in the first half last week against A&M, he bounced back this week. Threw for almost 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, and their defense dominated. They held Will Rogers and the Mike Leach offense to 0 touchdowns this week. Rogers threw for 300 yards, but 3 interceptions. They sacked him 7 times. Big Will Anderson, he had 4 of those. He was a beast. And it was just what Bama needed to clear that bad taste in their mouth, out of their mouth from a week ago. Next up in our winner of the weekend, I've got Bo Nix. Look, this has been a up and down season for Bo Nix at Auburn. But this week, we got the good version of Bo Nix. 21 of 26, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns in his team's his team's win over Fayetteville, Arkansas in Fayetteville. Every time Arkansas made it close and looked like they were coming back, Nix would answer, especially with his late touchdown run to seal the deal in this one. 42 yards rushing on the day. They win 38-23. Give Bo Nix a lot of credit for a guy who was benched a few weeks ago. He now has Auburn at 5-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC, and a chance to make some more noise in the coming weeks. Another winner of the weekend, I got Matt Corral, really continuing to make plays, and they gutted out a win in Knoxville, 31-26 over Tennessee. We'll get to the end of the game and how that played out, but for the most of the game, Corral was just a monster running the football. Plenty of design runs for him, 30 rush attempts for Corral, 195 rushing yards. He took some monster hits all game long, but kept bouncing back, leading the Rebel offense down the field. Corral will continue to have his name in the Heisman mix as he continues to perform at a high level. A lot of folks think maybe Corral can run the table and they can finish as one of the higher-ranked one-loss teams, go to a really good bowl game. And again, depending on what Bryce Young and Alabama do, I think Matt Corral will be right there in the Heisman conversation. Lane Kiffin will see to that. Another winner of the weekend, we talked about the bad part of LSU already. How about the good part of LSU this weekend? And that's running back Ty Davis-Price and the LSU run game. LSU, they were stagnant running the football through the first few weeks of the season. But Ty Davis-Price broke out this week to set the LSU single-game rushing record, 36 carries, 287 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. You tip your cap to Price and the LSU offensive line that played their best game of this season. This was in a tough spot against a good Florida team, but crazy to think Ty Davis-Price, he passed the likes of Kevin Falk, Ali Broussard, Darius Geis, and Leonard Fournette. He broke all of their records for most rush yards by a single player in a single game. LSU ran for over 320 yards on the day. Of course, the Coach O News grabs the headlines today, but Ty Davis-Price was phenomenal. And shout out to LSU for not quitting, right? Playing hard, playing inspired football, and getting Coach O yet another big win on his resume. This one over a top 20 Florida team. Another winner of the weekend, the legend that is Zeb Nolan. The former grad assistant entered on the Gamecocks' final drive against Vandy, led a 75-yard touchdown drive connecting with Xavier Leggett on a 9-yard scoring pass with 30 seconds left, and they beat Vandy Saturday night 21-20. Nolan is 24 years old. He said, quote, "I told you guys I thought I'd never put on the pads again. I wasn't sure I'd get this opportunity again." The Gamecocks offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield, they have come under some heavy fire the last couple of weeks. They trailed Tennessee 35-0 in the opening half. They were booed at Williams-Brice Stadium, but now they get a win. Look, I know it was Vanderbilt. You don't want to be playing close games with Vanderbilt, but I think Shane Beamer is going to take any win he can get in year one at South Carolina. Shout out to Zeb Nolan coming in for Luke Doty and getting the job done and getting the Gamecocks the victory. Another winner of the weekend, Stetson Bennett over at Georgia. Look, still no JT Daniels for the Bulldogs. Still no problem. Facing the number 11 team in the country in Kentucky, the Bulldogs found themselves in a low-scoring affair for much of this game. But Stetson Bennett does what Stetson Bennett does. He makes smart plays. He takes what's there. He was 14 for 20 for 250 yards, 3 touchdowns as the Bulldogs beat the Wildcats 30-13. Bennett just does a really good job of managing the game and making winning plays, and the Bulldogs improve to an undefeated 7-0. And lastly, my last winner of the weekend, I'm going with Texas A&M. Look, no letdown spot for them following their win over Alabama. This could have been one where they could have been lackadaisical early game at Missouri, but they went out to Como and routed Eli Drakewitz's club 35-14, got their ground game really humming this week. Isaiah Spiller, 20 carries, 168 yards and a touchdown. A-Shane had a big day too. Zach Calzada and this A&M offense really starting to hit their stride as of late. 431 total yards of offense for the Aggies, jumped out to a 21-0 lead, never looked back. They could be a problem for some teams to come in the next couple of weeks. They'll get Auburn, they'll get Ole Miss, but next up they get a date with South Carolina. And there you have it. Those are our winners of the weekend. Thanks again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll hit on our depressed of the weekend, our not so winners. Call them losers, in fact. We'll do that next. Always a good time to remind you guys about our friends at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. This week and every week, always a good chance to go check out Built Bar. You can check them out at their website, builtbar.com. What they have is 9 delicious flavors, from the coconut to the raspberry to the cherry to the mint brownie. My favorite. There is something for everybody. If you don't know what your favorite flavor is, you got to go check them out at builtbar.com. You can get a mixed box there where you can get 2 of each of their 9 flavors. Try them all. Find which one you like the best. Many of the flavors are packed with 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, 4 grams sugar, 4 grams net carbs. There's something for everybody. Go check them out, builtbar.com, and make sure you use our promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first order if you've never ordered from them before. Again, go to builtbar.com, use our promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off at builtbar.com. The holidays are right around the corner. You're going to be stuffing your face with terrible things. Make sure you got a Built Bar to help offset the bad things you're going to be eating, because Built Bar is good for you. Plenty of good stuff in there. Go check them out at builtbar.com. Going along here, Locked On SEC. We give you our winners of the weekend. We're not going to have time for honorable mention this week, so we kind of squeeze some of what we maybe would have done honorable mentions for into our winners category. But now we got to get to our who depressed in week 7 of the SEC. And there were some depressed this week. We got to start where else? Out in Knoxville, where Vol fans were throwing crap onto the field. And what turned out to be a really good football game down the stretch between Ole Miss and Tennessee and Knoxville. It was surprising that the headlines of the game turned out to be the Tennessee fans. On a close 4th and 24 play late in the game, the Vols were ultimately stopped. The referees reviewed it. Looked like, all right, maybe the guy's arm, his right arm passes but the football's in the left hand. And the refs rule he's short. It's a turnover. And the boos rained down on the SEC officials following the play review, and it appeared a good bit of the student section throwing plenty of things onto the field. Water bottles, cups, popcorn, even a bottle of mustard. It was all thrown down as gameplay was stopped for almost 20 minutes. The Vol band and cheerleaders were escorted off the field. And the peak moment came when a golf ball came out of the stands and hit Lane Kiffin. Kiffin picked it up, laughed, put it in his pocket, showed it to the ref. It was a moment of craziness, and unfortunately, all of this took away from what was an otherwise very entertaining game. It is worth noting it was a smaller faction of fans throwing stuff onto the field. It was not 100,000 people throwing stuff onto the field, as some of the headlines will make you think. But Greg Sankey in the SEC office released a statement following the game saying the SEC has expectations for behavior and sportsmanship, and the actions of those fans on Saturday night were unacceptable. Sankey said that they will review existing policies and impose penalties to make certain this thing does never happen again. Somebody brought up a good point, said, look, this has happened at other SEC stadiums before. The Vols aren't alone here, but you would think we could evolve as fans, and a bad call is a bad call. You boo, you do whatever, but don't throw stuff onto the field. There's a certain level of integrity you got to have in the world of college football, particularly the SEC. Not a great look, but I'm not going to beat up the entire Vol fan base, because it wasn't the entire Vol fan base throwing stuff onto the field at Neyland. Another depressed of the weekend. I'm going with a little bit of a combo here between Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham. What in the world was that, Florida? You roll Vandy a week ago, and then you go and lay an egg in Baton Rouge with an early kickoff against an LSU team that was basically the walking wounded with a coach on the hot seat. You got players injured, opting out, not playing. The Gator defense gave up the most rushing yards in a game ever to a single player in Ty Davis-Price, running all over them. Florida defense has been much improved this year, but this week they look more like the 2020 version of the Gator defense. Over 450 yards of offense LSU put up on them. And now as Florida drops to 4-3 overall, 2-3 in the SEC, starting to hear some rumblings about Dan Mullen's future in Gainesville. Florida is certainly disappointed to this point in the season. We'll see. I don't think Dan Mullen's going to be fired, but the Todd Grantham keeping him around, it looked like a good move up until this point. But man, that LSU team shorthanded. They lose Keyshawn Boutte. You don't have Miles Brennan. How does that team put up over 450 yards in offense on you? Jeez. Another depress of the weekend. Sticking with the same game. I'm going with Emory Jones, Florida quarterback. I've praised him in recent weeks, but Emory Jones was not good against LSU this past weekend. The second half, he gave way to Anthony Richardson, got the Gators back into the game with a couple of touchdown drives. They were tied at 42 late in the fourth quarter, but Emory Jones threw 2 interceptions, just 16 yards rushing on 10 carries. He was really inconsistent in this one. And to complicate things even more, after the game, Anthony Richardson, talking with the media, he was asked about fans worrying if he might transfer or leave Florida. He said, quote, "I can't really speak on that. Time is the only thing that tells. Right now, I'm a Gator." So what does that mean? And who do you start moving forward if you're Dan Mullen? Do you just chalk it up to Emory Jones had a bad game? Or do you reward Anthony Richardson for the good plays he made down the stretch of that game and say, all right, you're our starter moving forward? I think both guys will continue to play, but we'll see who will be the starter for the Gators ahead. Another depress of the weekend, Mike Leach over at Mississippi State. I've praised Will Rogers in recent weeks, the Bulldogs quarterback, running the Mike Leach offense well, but all that came to a halt this week as the Bulldogs were routed 49-9 against Bama, held without a touchdown in the game. I already gave you the numbers. 300 yards on 55 attempts, 3 picks, sacked 7 times. The lack of a run game, you just can't play in the SEC and not run the ball. You got to be balanced. Mike Leach be damned, he is going to fling it around, and the air raid offense, they're not going to run the ball. And they had, as a team, 19 carries for a net negative 1 yard rushing against Alabama. I keep saying Mike Leach is not for long in the SEC. Last weekend, an example of why. And lastly on my depressed list, I'm going with Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz. A really nice year one in the SEC last year at Missouri, but it certainly looks like they've taken a step back this year, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. The Tigers were routed 35-14 by Texas A&M this weekend in Columbia. Connor Bazelak threw a couple of interceptions. The Missouri defense gave up a ton of rushing yards to the Aggies. And now Mizzou has dropped to 3-4 in the season, 0-3 in the SEC. Drinkwitz is going to have to try to rally his crew, play better just to get to a bowl game at this point. I'm sure plenty in Como are asking, how long will Eli Drinkwitz last at Missouri? Already got one coach out in the SEC. We'll see if more are to come. Thanks again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen. We got plenty of great podcasts along the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Razorbacks, Locked On Vols, Locked On LSU, Locked On Bulldogs. Just about any SEC school you're looking for, we got it for you wherever you find your podcasts. Just search Locked On and the school name, and I bet you'll find it. I'm Chris Gordy. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back tomorrow as we continue our conversation. We'll start to look ahead to Week 8 in the SEC, start to get you guys ready for that. But plenty to still recap and digest from Week 7. It was a great week in the SEC. See if we'll have another one this coming weekend. I'm Chris Gordy. Talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.